And it was brought to my attention, I think on one of the slides, I put the same genus species twice. One in the roundworm and then one in the hookworm. So I'll let you know which one it's supposed to go under. But I'm pretty sure it goes under the hookworm. Okay, so helminths. So these are the worm-like parasites that infect humans. They start off, they progress from an egg to a larva and into adult stages. They're visible in their adult stage, so you can actually see the whole worm. And then in the adult form is where they multiply in humans. There are three main groups of helminths that are human parasites. So you have the flatworms, the flukes, and the tapeworms. Well, the flatworms, the platyhelminths, trematodes, and the cestodes. Yes?
Did you say in adult form they can multiply?
Yeah.
Because it says cannot on the board.
Oh, I'm sorry, cannot. Sorry. Cannot multiply.
So cannot, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm sorry. And then you have the roundworms and the thorny-headed worms, which I don't even think I go over that. I just have it in there because I have the ones that can affect humans. So helminths is the Greek word for worms. You guys are so transmission, they are usually from fecal-oral transmission of the eggs. And it's usually developed in the soil, so it's basically you get it from the soil, put it in your mouth, eat the eggs, starts the whole process. Or eat uncooked meats, beef and pork. So it completes their life cycle in the human intestines, and then you end up progressing or pooping out an egg into the soil, and it starts the process all over again. And then in one of these, you can actually have direct penetration of the skin by the larvae. So who's at risk? Those who are low income and live in poor sanitation areas, close proximity to contaminated water sources, malnutrition, have higher morbidity and mortality rates, and then the immunocompromised are particularly susceptible to autoinfection and parasite spread from person to person. So the first one we'll go over are the flukes, the trematodes, or the schistosomas, and then we'll talk about the tapeworms, the tedious. Schistosomiasis is caused by the blood flukes or the trematodes, and it's also called bilharzia. And this is the only trematode that invades through the skin, the schistosoma. And it comes in contact in contaminated fresh water, ponds, lakes, rivers, etc. So the three main species that I won't make you remember these three species, but just know that schistosomiasis is associated with freshwater snails. So about 2 million people are affected worldwide. It's prevalent in tropical and subtropical areas. Again, people have poor access to drinking water and adequate sanitation. Most of the people who are treated for schistosomiasis live in Africa. So the two major forms, you can have one is you have intestinal and then urogenital. So the urogenital usually occurs in women when they're out washing either the vegetables or doing their laundry in the waters, in the murky waters, and then the parasite actually ascend up the urogenital tract. So again, this is the life cycle. They live in freshwater snails. The infectious form known as cercerae emerges from the snails and contaminates the water. The human gets infected when they get into the waters, and the bacteria breaks through the skin in the infected waters. Bless you. skin, and then they go into the intestines of the human host. And then they migrate to the portal veins into the liver, and then mature into adults. And then I think these are the ones where so you get intestinal schistosomiasis, so you have abdominal pain, diarrhea, blood in the stool. So what it kind of sounds like some other disease that can be colitis. And in advanced cases, they can develop hepatomegaly. And then the urogenital schistosomiasis, the classic sign is they get hematuria. So someone comes in complaining of blood in their urine. Some women can have vaginal lesions, vaginal bleeding, vulvar nodules, dyspareunia. In men, it more affects the upper tract. They have in the seminal vesicles, prostate, so they might complain of prostatitis. But what happens is later on they can develop bladder cancer just because the scarring from the schistosomiasis. And how do you diagnose this? You would get a sample of their stool or their urine, and you look for the eggs. So when you order stool cultures, you guys talked about that in GI, when you order stool cultures, you can order stool OMPs, so you look for those. And then urine, you can also do a urine test for the eggs there. So since the eggs are passed intermittently, you'll have to get it several different stools. I think this is the one. Multiple times. You might have to do multiple stool samples. Praziquantel is a treatment for this. You may need to retreat it in 2 to 4 weeks. You'll want to recheck their stool once they're done with treatment just to make sure that they've had a successful cure. And did she talk about praziquantel in your helmet lecture? Which one did she give you for treatment of helmet?
Albendazole.
Albendazole, okay.
And then the Overtime.
Okay. And how do you prevent it? When you visit countries where schistosomiasis occurs, avoid swimming or wading in the waters. Drink bottled waters only when you're there. If you're having to bathe there, boil your water before you bathe, and towel drying. Vigorous towel drying after an accidental previous exposures help prevents the parasite from penetrating the skin. So scrub real hard if you think you've been exposed to something. But then I'm like, if you do that, you might break the skin and the parasite can get in better. See, this is why when I was in Vietnam, I bathed with rain. We didn't have running water in my aunt and uncle's house. It was literally a drain that ran into the bath in a big giant plastic tub with a hole in the room, and that was you'd have to sit there and do this. It was horrible. When we went to Vietnam, we were like, I had a friend, my cousin had a relative, it was a friend from college that lived in there, and her husband's work paid for her whole apartment, paid for her nanny. I mean, she had a house like it was like MTV Cribs. It was a nice house in Vietnam compared to what I was, living in the city with my aunt and uncles. And it was like water and a real toilet. So nice. Has anybody been to Vietnam? Well, she goes sometime. I want to take my family back when my kids are a little bit older. It was a 21-hour flight from LAX to Singapore. I think it was 18 hours straight. It was a long flight. Okay, tapeworms. Anybody know anybody got a tapeworm? Has anybody ever had a tapeworm?
I've had a worm, but I don't know what it was.
Was it a pinworm?
I don't know. I'm not really sure. He lost a lot of weight though.
You did?
I didn't have it as a friend.
Oh, as a friend? I was like, you had a worm?
He lost a lot of weight.
It's probably the beef tapeworm, but I don't know. Teniasis is an intestinal infection caused by adult tapeworms. So you have 3 species. You have your pork tapeworm, your beef, and the Asian tapeworm. So Tinea solium and Tinea saginata and Tinea asiatica. So basically you get this from eating raw or uncooked pork or beef. And so again, this is the life cycle. Humans are the only host. The adult tapeworm produces proglottids which mature. They detach from the tapeworm, and it migrates to the anus, and then they're either parts of their prostaglandins or the eggs are actually excreted from the into the stool, and then if they defecate outside, defecate into the soil. Pigs and cattle eat that infected soil, and then that's how they end up getting it, and they process the disease in the animal itself. And then you eat the uncooked or poorly cooked beef or pork, and then you get the eggs, and it kind of starts the whole process again. So a lot of times, how do you know someone has it? A lot of times they're usually asymptomatic, but they can, experience some vague GI symptoms. If they're the beef tapeworm, those are usually larger, so they may have more symptoms. But they can develop something called cysticercosis, which can cause seizures. So those go up into the CNS, up into the brain, and cause seizures. Again, just vague GI complaints, abdominal pain, cramping, decreased appetite, weight loss, and malaise. And then again, most visible symptom is you can actually see part of the tapeworm. They actually poop some of it out. And sometimes those segments can get large into the appendix, or the bile ducts and the pancreatic ducts. I think I recently heard something on the radio or TV about somebody who thought they had like either a hemorrhoid or something that was dangling from their anus, and it actually ended up being a tapeworm. Can you imagine?
There was a show, like weird ER stories or whatever, on TLC, and this mom thought her daughter was getting fat, and then went to Mexico, like came to it, and she bought her a pill with tapeworm eggs in it, and gave it to her without her knowing it. And so they went to the ER because, like, her stomach was all blocked up and it's huge, and come to find out her mom gave her tapeworms, like more than one, there was several. And they had like blocked up her colon and stuff.
So these are just some differential diagnoses of a patient comes in with lower GI pains. These are obviously in your differentials, now including tapeworms. How do you diagnose it? Again, getting stool culture, stool samples, and you'll have to do multiple of them again on different days. And then you can also do imaging. They have serologic methods, but they're still in research. They're not available yet. And then treatment, praziquantel, and then the closamide is an alternative. But praziquantel is the medication most often used to treat active tinnitus. So I've asked you a question: which of the following is the most common medication used to treat active tinnitus? And I gave you several alternatives. The answer would be praziquantel. Hey, Tanner, will you tell them what you were telling me about what worms can be used for?
So now it's not FDA approved yet, I saw that, but they're using helminths, ingesting them to
modulate your immune system for patients. They're saying for IBD, rheumatoid arthritis, and MS, and then allergies. So I actually worked with a provider that a patient was doing that. He wasn't overseeing it, but he was working with someone else. And he had some pretty good response to it. But I don't know how often, but you buy the worms and you ingest them. But
Can you imagine?
yeah.
Where do you buy?
I think they were buying them from Europe or something because I didn't have. I think that was some company. I think in Europe, but they're grown in a laboratory. The worms.
I remember this was supposed to be in this video, this spot, but I think this is a kind of video. Thank you, Taylor.
Yeah.
I'd probably come to me with severe allergy.
There's quite a few studies on it.
He had been to many places and used many drops, but then there was no relief for his pain. So when he came to us, and I happened to look inside his eye, I saw something white moving inside there. Now watch closely at this patient's eye. There is a silvery shining object inside the patient's eye. Now when the nurse with the cotton bud touches the eye, there is some exaggerated movement. And it looks like coils inside the eye. This can mean only one thing. There is some living object inside the eye that looks and behaves like a worm. Now we have to make sure that this is indeed a worm. If it is a worm, it will in all likelihood escape to other parts of the body the moment we touch it or interfere with it. So to prevent that, now the nurse has barred its posterior movement with a cotton bud. Now the cotton bud has to be placed at least near the center of where the worm's body is. That will prevent the worm from sliding back into the eye and behind into the brain. Now made an opening into the conjunctiva, which is not the seeing part of the eye. Now you can see some white centrical tubes likely to be worm and pulling them out. And you can still to see the length of the worm. And now it is a line. You can see the hand moving. So I'm trying to untangle it and pull it out. But I feel that the distal part, the end part of it is what causes the and I'm putting the rest of the worm back into the eye, onto the eye, not into the eye. In the hope that it will relieve itself in the eye. Now watch carefully as the worm starts wriggling out. Now it is wriggled free from the eye, and I can see both there. And this is the time I know that it is not going to go anywhere else. It is going to be here, and I have all the time in the world to take it. And I can be reasonably sure that no part of the worm is now going to remain inside the patient's eye. I have taken it out, goes into a glass bottle.
And to get that glass bottle and save it for them later.
So how would you take that one?
This is the worm that
Keep it on this way.
They're both kind of like all those things that Julian had to use.
This other one.
This is free video this is the fourth one.
Which two were with more common?
I think the eye one. Not the eye one, I don't think. I want to say maybe the pork, but I'm not positive on that one. I'll let you know on that one. But I know the beef is the bigger, longer ones than the pork ones.
That's great.
And then the next one we'll talk about all the roundworms. There's intestinal tissue. We'll mainly just talk about the intestinal roundworms. The Ascaris lumbricoides and the Enterovirus vermicularis. And this is the one that I think are on two sides, the Indicator americanus. I think I'll find out which one where it belongs, because I can't remember off the top of my head. But ascariasis is a Ascaris is an intestinal parasite of humans, causes ascariasis. It's the most common parasitic worm infection in humans worldwide, but it's uncommon in the U.S. Most cases in the U.S. are from refugees or immigrants or travelers to endemic tropical areas. And then the humans are infected with Ascaris, levocoides, or Ascarisum, often in food that's contaminated by human feces. So again, you can see why in the poor, unsanitary conditions where people end up, it's all fecal oral, because they, like I said, they wash their foods and they bathe and poop all in the same waters. You can also get the infection, the eggs, transferred to your hands and your mouth after touching contaminated soil. So you can do it that way instead of the waters. And then you can be infected by the Ascarisum, which is closely related to roundworms of pigs, after cysts are ingested in food contaminated with feces or larvae in undercooked or raw pork. So this is another life cycle. So basically, the human is the host. The eggs hatch in the duodenum, and then the adult larvae penetrate the walls of the small intestine, and they migrate into the portal circulation into the liver and the heart and the lungs. And these ascend the bronchial tree, so go up into the bronchial tree and into the oral pharynx. Then they are swallowed, and they go into the small bowel. There, they form into an adult worm. They will attach the walls of the intestine, and they can release eggs into the stool, and then you start the whole cycle all over again. But the life cycle complete is about 2 to 3 months, and the worms can live 1 to 2 years. So I think in these patients you get a lot of anemia because they're sucking on the blood in the walls of the small intestine. So symptoms, the larvae migrating through the lungs can have you cough, wheeze, you might cough up some blood, some respiratory symptoms. Some people can actually notice a worm passing in their stool, or they cough up the worm. So if they have a significant amount of eggs or worms in the abdomen, they can get blockage and have a bowel obstruction. So differentials can be cholangitis, abdominal pain, you have asthma with the coughing, if it comes in complaining of coughing or wheezing, or bowel obstruction, or appendicitis, so all the abdominal pain. And how do you diagnose it? Again, look at their stools. You can see the adult worms in the stool, or emerging from the nose, mouth, or the rectum. You look at the sputum analysis, and you can look for larvae. So they'll have Charcot-Leyden crystals in the sputum. And then you may have marked eosinophilia as the larvae migrate up the lungs, through the lungs into the intestines. And you can do a chest x-ray. They may show infiltrates. Treatment, there they are, albendazole. So a lot of times if your patient gets obstructed, they'll require surgery for you to go in and remove the worms. And how do you prevent that? You wash your hands thoroughly with soap and water before you handle any foods. Washing, peeling, cooking raw vegetables before you eat them. And then try not to eat undercooked, underwashed vegetables in areas where human feces are used as a fertilizer. And then no defecating outdoors.
I'm more confident, and I've changed as a person. Now I'm able to be exposed to different things that I wasn't exposed to.
I was like, I don't know what that has to do with parasites, but okay.
2 days later, Doris takes Brittany to her doctor.
When she did the assessment on Brittany, she did hear some congestion in her lungs. She also heard some faint wheezing.
The doctor left the room for a minute, and then she came back and she had a book in her hand and she said, "I think I know what you have." She said that what I had was a worm called Ascaris.
Ascaris is a roundworm that infests the human digestive tract. When eggs are swallowed, they hatch into microscopic larvae that make their way from the small intestine into the bloodstream. There they are carried to the lungs, where they climb up the host's airways and are swallowed back into the intestines when they reach maturity and breed. Usually, adult worms stay in the digestive tract where they can live undetected for years. In Brittany's case, it's likely her fever made her body too hot for the worms. In this inhospitable environment, these Ascaris worms head for the nearest exit, crawling up her esophagus and into her airways, triggering her cough.
My biggest fear was that I was going to keep coughing up worms.
In extreme cases, Ascaris worms can cause secondary infections and intestinal blockages, which can be fatal.
Could you imagine if you're at home and all of a sudden you start coughing up worms?
No.
Or can you imagine the person who sees them and says, "Oh my God, look."
It's a quiet Monday morning.
Yeah, the voices are could be fatal. Like, yes, I get a lot of those.
A dream about that, you know, like a fear, like a dream that I'd like pull the word out.
Intestinal, kind of like what you were talking about. Intestinal blockage also. It's like you lose something. Okay, that's an issue.
I thought it'd be fun to find one of them, but if I found that,
And then this is the hookworm. So I'll look that up because I must have that in the wrong spot, the Necator americanus. So the hookworm is also intestinal parasite for humans. Two main species are the Ancylostoma duodenale and the Necator americanus. Hookworm infection is usually transmitted primarily by walking barefoot. So this is the one you don't want to walk around barefoot. So the hookworm infection occurs where eggs are passed in the feces of an infected person. And an infected person defecates outside. And then if the feces from an infected person uses fertilizer, eggs are deposited on the soil. The eggs mature, release into larvae, and then the larvae penetrate the skin and carry through the blood vessels to the heart and to the lungs. And they ascend to the pharynx, and then they are swallowed. And then the adult worms live in the small intestines, where they attach to the intestinal walls, and then they can live there for 1 to 2 years. But it can be even longer. So symptoms like infections may be asymptomatic. Often the first time, as you can see, a cutaneous infection. You might have a really itchy red patch or rash on the hands or the feet. A person who has heavy infection may experience abdominal pain, diarrhea, loss of appetite, fatigue, and they can also have anemia because of the worms being attached to the small intestinal wall, just sucking on their blood. Migration of the large numbers of larvae through the lungs occasionally causes something called Loeffler syndrome. They have coughing, wheezing, eosinophila, and sometimes hemoptysis. You can also develop something called cutaneous larvae migrans when an animal hookworm infects humans. So it's caused by the larvae as they migrate through the skin. And again, it causes that itchy, erythematous, serpentinous skin lesion. It looks like a serpent, like a snake in your feet. So differentials, acute anemia, anemia-itis, asthma, contact dermatitis, scabies. And again, how do you diagnose it? Stool sample. Always get stool samples. A CBC for anemia, and then the diagnosis of cutaneous larvae migrans, you can actually just see them, but they don't have eggs in the stool because they're actually in the skin. Treatment, albendazole, and then if they're really anemic, you want to treat their anemia as well. So preventing unhygienic defecation, avoid direct skin contact with soil, so you wear your shoes, like we talked about. And then get your dogs and cats treated, so you don't get that cutaneous larvae. Honestly, I think this might be the last video. Commercial.
Entire population was thought of as lazy, that may in part be what rampant illness be the reason an entire population was thought of as lazy, that may in part be what rampant hookworm infections did to the rural poor in the American South for over a century. I'm Anna Rothschild, and this is Gross Science. Human hookworms are nematodes that live in warm, moist climates throughout most of the world. You get them by coming in contact with contaminated soil, say by running around barefoot. That's when tiny hookworm larvae, under a millimeter long, can wriggle into your skin. This isn't painful, but it might cause a little itchiness at the point of entry called ground itch. Meanwhile, the larvae begin a grand tour of your body. They enter your bloodstream and pass through your heart en route to your lungs. Then they migrate up your windpipe into your throat, and you swallow them, at which point they make the long journey down your digestive tract. Finally, they end up in your small intestines, where the larvae mature, mate, and bite into the lining of your gut to drink your blood, often for years at a time. The females release thousands of eggs per day, which you poop out, starting the cycle again. People have been known to have hundreds of hookworms in their guts at a time, and the more worms you have, the worse your symptoms can be. A hookworm infection rarely kills you on its own, but it can cause anemia, protein deficiency, gastrointestinal problems, weight loss, and fatigue. Basically, it makes you weak and tired. And if you have a bad case of it as a child, the severe anemia can lead to stunted growth and stunted cognitive development. And that's where the stigma of the lazy, slow Southerner comes in. Now, I'm not sure how prevalent this prejudice is in America today. It wasn't something I ever heard growing up. But when you recognize that in the early 20th century, when this stigma was quite strong, up to 40% of people in certain parts of the region had hookworm, that stereotype, while deeply unjust, starts to make a bit of sense. It's no wonder that workers were weak and children had trouble in school. So why did so many Southerners have hookworm? Well, both the climate and the sandy soil of some parts of the South were ideal for the parasite's life cycle. But on top of that, it largely affected poor communities where kids may have run around without shoes, and effective sanitation and plumbing weren't common. It was one of the few diseases in the American South that thrived because of widespread poverty and likely also perpetuated that poverty. In the early 1900s, there was a huge campaign to eradicate the disease and educate people about the parasite. It's totally treatable with medications, but preventing reinfection requires some pretty fundamental lifestyle changes. It ended up taking decades to get it under control, but today, very few people in the US actually get hookworm. Many other places in the world, however, are not so lucky. Right now, according to the CDC, up to 740 million people are infected with hookworm. It's just one of many neglected diseases that sap people's vitality worldwide and may trap them in poverty. And if that's not gross, I don't know what is. Ew.
And that's just what it looks like the far right. These are just endoscopic pictures in the lining, the little worms. And then the whipworms, Trichuris trichiuria. Humans are again the only host for this parasite. No animal reservoirs that recognized. Again, fecal-oral transmission by ingested eggs of contaminated food or hands. And the same kind of life cycle, they hatch in the small intestines, in the larva form, penetrating the intestinal mucosa. And they're called this because they kind of look like a handle and a lash of a whip. Symptoms, again, most of them are asymptomatic, but if you have less than 100, you're frequently asymptomatic. However, you get more, the more infestation you have, the worse your symptoms are. Heavy infections, they have thousands of worms. They can have epigastric pain, vomiting, nausea, abdominal distension, weight loss. You can have tenesmus, where you have painful straining, and then rectal prolapse from that. And then the dysentery syndrome is often observed in heavy infestations. Bloody mucus, diarrhea, small frequent stools, tenesmus, anemia, and then the growth retardation as well. And the differentials are there. And how do you diagnose this? Microscopic exam, again, looking at the stool. And these have a characteristic look to them, like an American football shape. So if I asked you on a gram stain over or stool sample, which of the following criteria would show the characteristic football, American football stain, you would know it would be this one. Really kind of look like a football? Kind of. Treatment, albendazole. And again, treatment of anemia if it's warranted. And the same preventions, wash your hands before you eat, wash your hands when you handle food, teach children to wash their hands, wash and peel all vegetables before you eat, and then cooking meat to safe temperatures. So I tell my sister who likes to eat her steak, who eats her steak really raw here? She loves to have it like almost in the meat. I was like, well, might as well just eat it from the cow itself. I used to always cook mine well done, because again, I was worried I was going to get some tapeworm of some sort. But now I can actually do medium. You don't even know how good it is. And then lastly is the pinworms. Did you guys talk about this in peds? Yes. So, enterobiasis. So humans are considered the only hosts of this. Most common helminth infection in the U.S. Again, mostly it's in children or the parents of children who are infected because they end up actually accidentally self-inoculating themselves. School-age children, you can already know. So these are the eggs are in the perianal folds. Which I think is kind of creeps me out because the female larvae only come out at night. Did they tell you that? Most infections are usually at night. and they come out and they drop this sticky gelatinous substances, where that's why the worms, when they come out, that's why they can stick around the anus, because the female drops the eggs around there. And then that's when the female larvae is moving around, that's what causes the pruritus, or why they're sleeping, because that worm is moving around the bottom. That's just another sleeping site. Signs and symptoms, mainly it's perianal itching, really nighttime nocturnal perianal itching is your classic sign. They can have sometimes abdominal pain. Insomnia is mainly from itching at night while they're sleeping. And then again, some of them can block the appendiceal lumen and cause acute appendicitis. Now, rarely you can have some of the worms ascend the female genital tract, causing a vaginitis. But a lot of times they can get secondary infections from scratching so much, and they get an infection in the perianal area. So that's a really busy site. This just tells you how to diagnose. This is actually a better slide right here. So they told you how to do the Scotch tape, right? And I've told y'all a story about my patient with the Scotch tape, right? Can I tell you this? So an older lady was on internal medicine. She was complaining of nocturnal perianal itching. And so she's telling our doc that, and so he's like, well, she didn't have any small children, so it would be unlikely that she'd have pinworms. But he told her what she could do at night. He told her how to do the Scotch tape. You take it and kind of put it on the rectum when you're at night. So then, one day, she shows up in clinic, and I don't know where the instructions cross-contaminated, but she got it so wrong. She shows up to clinic, and she has her poo that she took Scotch tape and wrapped it around the poo. Now, this is also the same lady who sits in the, one time I caught her I was walking in the room, and she had her wig on her lap, and she was petting her. So it's the same lady. But, so she came and brought Scotch tape poo for us to examine for pinworms, instead of doing just the Scotch tape. And I told the story. I mean, I about busted out laughing when the doc told me what she wanted. I was dying. So every time I do this lecture about the pinworm, I have to tell that story. So yeah, so she wrapped the poo in Scotch tape, which makes you think, oh my God, did she dig that out of the toilet, or did she have one of those nun's cap that captured it, and then she wrapped it? And you know she didn't use gloves. I'm sure she did. But that is not how you do it. You put the Scotch tape up to the bottom. Don't wrap the poo around it. Don't wrap it around poo. Treatment, albendazole. You can give them anti-pruritic creams to the perianal region to help relieve the itching. But these come back. Prevention, wash your hands with water, teach your children to do the same. People who are infected should bathe every morning to get rid of the eggs off of their rectum. Make sure you wash that off. And then keep their nails trimmed. Because if they're scratching back there, they have long nails, they can keep the eggs in the nails, then reinfect themselves when they scratch. And that's pictures of pinworms. Do we even want to see the videos? Everybody's tired of videos? Remember that when Oprah gave off cars? She gave a car.